Evolution of film form is a course that seeks to introduce the development of the narrative form of cinema to students who may not have knowledge of such a thing. It starts with what is known as the early cinema period, where which is characterized by, let's say, an absence of the narrative form, the storytelling form that we now expect from cinema everywhere in the world. It starts from there and introduces the elements that characterize that period, and then slowly comes into the narrative form that develops almost across the world everywhere as cinema becomes an industrial activity, as cinema becomes a full-length storytelling medium, and so on. So we have divided up the course into 10 modules, where the first 2 are dedicated to the early cinema period, so that we know clearly what it means not to have this kind of narrative form, and then it kind of introduces the elements that appear when narrative develops into a more complex and more elaborate shape. This is where one of the most important, if you like, dynamics of the history of cinema belongs. If we know about this, we can actually understand a whole lot of things, including why a certain form of narration develops in a certain context, what kind of industrial, social, sometimes economic factors are involved in it, and so on and so forth. And of course, the question of modernity, the relationship between modernity and cinema, film as a form. So we've moved through the so-called Hollywood classical period, institutional narration as we call it. Then we go to some of the exceptions. For example, Indian cinema is often said to be an exception to this kind of narrative development. So we introduce the peculiarities or the specificities of Indian popular film form. And we also address something else in between, which is the question of realism, which is relevant to almost all cinemas in the world in some way or the other.